processes and procedures were in place prior to the start of the engagement?
So prior to the start of the engagement, the client was working to the old MOD assurance processes, which typically meant risk assessing and producing documents against the old Information Assurance Standards 1 and 2, and the production of a Risk Management and Accreditation Document Set, or RMADS, as it is more commonly and frequently referred to. At that time, the MOD had a system called DART, onto which all systems that needed accreditation would be registered, and those systems would be allocated to an accreditor. In some cases, the system would be assigned to an accreditor from a lower tier organisation, and in some cases, one of the biggest challenges was that the system might be allocated to an accreditor, but the accreditor themselves might not have full sight of everything that's going on within the systems. I mean, in essence, this system, with minor adaptations along the way, is the same system of accreditation that's been in place for 20 years. And we all know that in those 20 years, the threat to systems and the security requirements for systems has changed significantly, and yet the methodology for accrediting and securing it hasn't.
Why did the client need to update their assurance process?
Well, there's a number of factors that came into play, really. Part of it operational, and part of it because of a change of methodology. So if you can imagine, over 20 years and since DART was introduced, the number of systems that the MOD had were increasing all the time, to the point at which you had literally thousands of systems in DART, and the accreditors were becoming overwhelmed by the workload. On top of that, often there'd be only one or two people who would have access to DART itself, and often the project teams are outside of the MOD, so they wouldn't have access to it, so they wouldn't be able to see the current level of accreditation and assurance that was being provided. So we've got accreditors becoming overwhelmed by an increasing number of systems, plus a lack of transparency and oversight. Then on top of that, some systems were going 1, 3, or even 5 years without review. Well, when we're talking about defence systems here, and we're talking about security now with a big S, leaving a system for 5 years can be highly problematic, given that systems could become vulnerable, exploitable, and none of that is being reassessed and none of it is being addressed. So the security controls aren't being updated, but also because we're going this period of time in between reviews, the risk assessment itself isn't getting updated. So we're basically assuming that a system still has the same risks that it had 5 years ago. And then along came the new MOD Secure by Design methodology. And once that was mandated, effectively the old process of IS1, IS2 and production of the RMADS went out the window anyway. And then finally, the client actually had a new system, and Secure by Design mandated that all new systems had to use Secure by Design from day one. So the desire to get a new system into the process meant that Secure by Design had to be adopted. In the meantime, of course, we've now got clients who are looking at systems that are under current accreditations of the old system, and what Secure by Design says is that when it comes up for review, they also need to be moved into Secure by Design. So this is driving organisations to move into the new methodology, which is great, especially since we know that the old methodology hasn't really been fit for purpose for a good 5 or 6 years now.
Why is Secure by Design such a big step forward?
Well, the first thing is because it is continuous rather than time limited. So rather than doing an annual review, or as we've already pointed out, a 5-year review, the reviews are a continuous part of the development, the implementation and the running of the system. and the requirements within it to have regular security reviews. So in a lot of cases they will probably end up being quarterly security reviews, means that security is being reviewed on a much more frequent basis. Also, the onus is now being placed on the capability owner and the SRO to own and manage the risk. And although this was the intention of the old methodology, it didn't happen in reality. So it's been much more formalised, and there's now an acceptance that the capability owner and the SRO have that requirement placed upon them. There's no certification, there's no security accreditation, and there's no accreditor. So all of this is done now from within the project itself. Although there's a new system to manage all of this, the system is available offline. So individuals who don't have access via MOD systems can now get to this information. Not just the information about the system and its assurance levels, but also all of the guidance, the question sets and the requirements that are needed to be able to deliver the assurance as well. So it's making the information much more transparent and available to project teams themselves. And then finally, for larger or more complex projects, they will be allocated a security assurance coordinator called a delivery team security lead. They effectively act as the go-between between the SRO and the project team themselves. They provide that assurance and oversight at the project team level that everything is progressing appropriately and everything's being done according to the plan. And they will also make sure that the controls that are being selected in accordance with the SRO's risk appetite. In turn, they can then go back to the SRO and provide that level of assurance that everything is happening appropriately. So that provides that continuous assurance middle piece between the MOD themselves and the project team.
How did the client choose the supplier?
Well, at the time that the new system was coming online, the requirement for secure by design was in the pipeline but hadn't necessarily been mandated. So there's an element of uncertainty initially as to which approach was going to be required. But what the client did recognise was that they didn't in-house have sufficient capability or resource to do secure by design. So we had an existing relationship with the client, having worked with them in previous projects, and we went and had a meeting with them, explained our capability and explained that regardless of which assurance methodology was required, we had the knowledge and the resource to be able to take them through that. We could plan for secure by design, but if secure by design hadn't arrived at the time the system came online, then we could revert back to the old IS1, IS2 accreditation as well, because we had experience in that also. And we could do either approach within their budget capability as well. So the client felt reassured that we were a safe pair of hands to be able to trust us with this, particularly in the early days of secure by design, when there was still a lot of uncertainty around what the workload was going to look like and what the artefacts that needed to be produced would look like as well.
Why is Advent IM well placed to support secure by design?
So we've already got a long history of working on security assurance and security accreditation projects using both central government and Ministry of Defence methodologies. But we've also got 20 plus years experience of delivering continuous assurance into our clients. So actually, although secure by design is a relatively new methodology, the concept of continuous assurance isn't. And that's a concept that we've been delivering for many years. And we've been delivering security and security assurance into agile project methodologies as well, which means, again, we've got that experience of doing that continuous ongoing assurance activity. Knowing that secure by design was coming down the route, and knowing that within secure by design would be the control set that's drawn from the NIST CSF, our lead consultant in this area with an MOD background had already done plenty of background reading into the control set requirement. We put him on a range of courses, including becoming a NIST certified professional practitioner, which meant that we have now both got the knowledge and the certification, the qualification to be able to deliver this type of work. So by the time Secure by Design actually came in and we had a project that required Secure by Design, within Advent we'd already done dry runs of delivering continuous assurance. So we knew what the process needed to look like, we knew when certain activities needed to take place, and we already had the templates ready to go in order to produce the security artifacts that were required as well.
What deliverables did the client expect from the project initially?
Well, initially the overarching expectation was that we would be able to deliver a security assurance to Secure by Design utilising the control set within NIST 800-53, which is the comprehensive security and privacy control set that sits within NIST. Within that, there are a number of formal deliverables that needed to be produced. So, for example, the security plan, the risk assessment, and so on. And although at the time there were no mandated templates for how those deliverables needed to look, because we'd already been doing those dry runs within Advent, we had templates ready to go. The client trusted us to be able to adapt and evolve as things progressed throughout the project. So we worked with a flexible set of requirements. We knew the deliverables that needed to be handed over, but we also knew that we could adapt those deliverables as the methodology became more mature and we had more experience of using it.
What outcomes did the client receive?
So there are a range of security artifacts that were produced as part of the deliverables. So the security management plan, the risk assessment and risk register, and then ultimately the security case, which you could kind of see as being the replacement for the old RMADS, but actually is also significantly different and a much better outcome than the RMADS used to be. Ultimately, the outcome that the client received was a security assurance for a product that was being placed into an MOD environment, and the MOD received the assurance that the product they're going to take on has got appropriate security around it that can go into live environments and can be trusted to be secure.
How do the deliverables received compare to the initial expectations?
Well, the initial expectations were fairly fluid because this is a new methodology and probably one of the first ones to go through that methodology, and so therefore a lot of the documentation that we were using, it was the first time it had been used in reality as part of a live project. So actually the expectations were set right at the beginning that yes, this had to be a successful assurance program. Equally, there needed to be a degree of agility and flexibility and adaptiveness as we went through it. Ultimately, the deliverables have more than met the expectations of the client.
Did Advent IM consultants show adequate knowledge and expertise?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, we've got a long track record of successfully working within the defence sector. So we're familiar with the way in which defence works, we're familiar with the language, and we're familiar overall with the methodologies that they were used to working with. Equally, we had got the experience and the background research that we've done into Secure by Design and the NIST CSF. And of course, as I mentioned, the lead consultant had also gone off and done qualification as well. So a combination of experience and qualifications, but that experience also meaning that we could adapt and evolve as the project progressed. So more than enough capability within the team to deliver against this requirement.
What benefits will Secure by Design bring to the client?
So the first thing is that it moves the security approach from being a static, time-bound approach to an approach of continuous assurance. The benefits of that, well, first of all, it means that we are continually looking at assessing and managing risk. That means that we're only drawing down security controls that are required at that point in time. So if you're working initially on a concept phase and all you've got are concept designs, then you don't have a product itself that needs to be secured. So you wouldn't pull down all of those controls at that point in time. You bring them down where those controls are needed and where they can be targeted. But what it also means is that you're not overlooking security controls or missing security controls when they're needed as well. And because it's continuous assurance, then we don't have that 1, 3 or 5 year lag period where controls can become ineffective or out of date, or where new risks can be identified and controls not be selected. So it's reducing the lag time in which vulnerabilities can be exploited. It's also a benefit to the client, to our client, in that they are able to demonstrate a level of capability and assurance that they can then play back to their client. So in turn, that makes them a really good customer. So beyond the benefit to individual organisations doing secure by design, what we end up with is a whole range of organisations who are demonstrating assurance to the Ministry of Defence themselves, which means that the MOD then have that level of assurance that across their supply base they're getting security by design and getting continuous assurance. Ultimately, it's completely changing their mindset about how security is done and embedded security into all of their projects from day one, and then throughout the lifetime of the project, through the delivery phase, right the way through to the decommissioning of the product. So security is done from start to finish. As I say, continuous assurance.